My daughter-in-law thinks she's some kind of internet queen, a power-drunk influencer who turned me into her content. She mocked me, humiliated me publicly, and used my pain for views and profit. I gave her a roof over her head, fed her, bought her clothes, and yet she repaid me with the coldest kind of ingratitude. I stayed silent through every insult, until she crossed the line, until her obsession with fame began threatening my health and my life. That's when I knew this had to end. Are you curious to know what she did to me and what I did to her in return? If you are, tell me in the comments where and when you're listening from. Subscribe, like, and share this video, then sit down and listen carefully. I promise today's story will not disappoint you. That morning began like any other until I saw the silver box on my porch, tied with a satin ribbon. The label said, "From Paige Whitfield, my daughter-in-law," but underneath the return address read Caroline Whitfield. My hands trembled a little. Caroline was her mother. I wondered why the package would come through her name. I carried it inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and carefully lifted the lid. Inside lay a silk dress, folded like a secret, a designer handbag I had only seen in magazine ads, and a small ivory card. I smiled for a second, thinking maybe Paige had finally learned to be thoughtful. Then I read the message. "Happy birthday to the sweetest mom ever. You deserve all the good things in life, not like that stingy, nosy old witch." For a moment, I didn't understand. Then my eyes froze on the words. My throat tightened. The witch was me. My knees gave way, and I sank into the chair, my pulse racing so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. I looked at the card again. The handwriting was unmistakably Paige's, her little hearts over the eyes, her favorite gold pen ink glimmering. My body felt cold. I thought of all those nights she had come over with fake smiles, bringing homemade cookies, filming her cheerful vlogs about family dinners with my adorable mother-in-law. Her voice used to sound warm, tender. Now it rang in my mind like a lie. On my laptop screen, her newest video autoplayed. Paige in her immaculate white kitchen, laughing as she stirred soup. "This is my mother-in-law's recipe," she said to the camera. "She's the sweetest woman ever." The comment section overflowed with hearts and admiration. I stared at her face, that glowing influencer smile that millions adored, and realized how little they knew. In that moment, something inside me cracked. I wasn't angry yet, just deeply shaken, like a person who has just stepped on the edge of an abyss without realizing it. I whispered to myself, almost inaudible, I thought kindness could change people. But what I got instead was betrayal filmed in perfect 4K. And as the sunlight hit the gift box again, that silk dress looked less like a present and more like evidence. Before everything fell apart, my life had a quiet rhythm that I thought would last forever. I am 63 years old, a retired banker from Wells Fargo, living in a peaceful suburb outside Charleston, South Carolina. My husband and I bought our colonial-style house back in the 90s, when interest rates were still human. We built it brick by brick, painted it ourselves, and filled it with books, photographs, and laughter. After he passed away from a sudden stroke during our anniversary trip to Savannah, the silence of the house became heavier, but it was a silence I learned to live with. I share the place with Oliver, my ginger cat, who acts as if he owns the mortgage. My mornings are spent tending to my hydrangeas, my afternoons at the church women's group, and my evenings with a cup of chamomile tea and an old record playing in the background. Life wasn't grand, but it was mine, calm, predictable, dignified. Old habits from my banking years never left me. I still review estate and inheritance laws mostly out of curiosity. Sometimes neighbors come over with coffee and questions about their pensions or IRA accounts. I enjoy explaining things, seeing the relief on their faces when money stops being a mystery. Numbers make sense to me. People, not always. In our small Charleston community, people often described me as graceful, reliable, the kind of woman who keeps everything in order. I dressed neatly, paid bills on time, brought pies to bake sales, and sent Christmas cards to everyone, even those who forgot mine. I believed decency was a kind of currency. The more you gave, the richer you became, in peace. Then Travis, my only son, came home one Thanksgiving with a young woman named Paige. She was stunning, long blonde hair, honey-colored eyes, laughter that filled the room like champagne bubbles. She called me Mom from the first day, hugged me tightly, and told me how lucky Travis was to have me. I remember thinking, finally, someone who will make him happy. Back then, I didn't know that beauty can be a mask and kindness can be rehearsed. I looked at her and saw a daughter I never had. She looked at me and saw something entirely different. But that realization would come later. For the moment, I was just Rachel Nolan, a widow with a cat pension, and the simple belief that life, if managed properly, would remain steady. I couldn't have been more wrong. Travis met Paige the way most modern love stories begin, through social media. He was a software engineer, quiet and methodical, more comfortable behind screens than in crowded rooms. Paige, on the other hand, was sunlight and noise. She ran a small but growing food vlog called Paige's Pantry, where she baked cupcakes in pastel aprons and told her viewers that love always started in the kitchen. When she commented under one of Travis's posts about homemade pasta, it led to a string of late-night messages, cooking videos, and within months, weekend trips between their cities. The first time Travis brought her home, Paige arrived holding a bouquet of peonies and a box of lemon tarts she said she'd made herself. She hugged me tightly and chirped, "Hi, Mommy. I've heard so much about you." That word Mommy startled me at first, but it sounded affectionate enough that I let it pass. She looked radiant in a soft cream dress, her hair tied neatly, her perfume light and sweet. She moved around my kitchen like she had always belonged there, opening drawers, laughing easily, complimenting my china. I remember watching her slice fruit for dessert, the precision in her hands, the grace in her smile. She's clever. I thought, more self-assured than I ever was at that age. I admired her energy, her poise, and the way she made Travis laugh. For a moment, I believed this young woman might be a blessing, someone who could fill the emptiness that had lingered since my husband's passing. But beneath her charm, there was something too polished, too deliberate. Every compliment seemed rehearsed, every gesture perfectly timed for admiration. Still, I convinced myself it was just youth. Maybe that's how young women behaved now. Confident, camera-ready, always smiling for the world to see. At their engagement party, the illusion cracked for the first time. The evening was warm and bright, with candles flickering across the backyard and laughter echoing over the jazz band. Paige looked like a magazine bride-to-be, clinging to Travis's arm as if she had won a prize. Her mother, Caroline Whitfield, arrived late, dressed in sequins and carrying an air of quiet superiority. As she toasted the couple, she smiled toward me and said almost too sweetly, "How lucky for my daughter to marry into such a well-off family." The guests chuckled politely, but the words struck sharp like a thorn under silk. I felt my smile stiffen as the air around us grew heavier. Paige laughed awkwardly and changed the subject, but I caught the flash of discomfort in Travis's eyes. That night, when the guests had gone, I couldn't shake the echo of Caroline's words. They clung to me like a warning I didn't yet understand. When Travis told me he was being transferred to the Charleston branch, I felt a quiet joy. It had been years since I'd had him close by, and the thought of hearing his footsteps in the hallway again made the house feel alive. Then Paige added softly, her eyes wide with sincerity, "Mommy, why don't we move in with you? It'll be easier for us to help around. I can cook for you, keep you company." Her tone was so tender, so convincing that refusing her felt almost cruel. I hesitated, worrying about their privacy, but she reached for my hand and said, "You've taken care of everyone your whole life. Let us take care of you now." Those words warmed me. I agreed. The following month, my once quiet home became busy again, laughter boxes and the scent of fresh paint. Travis set up his office in the den, while Paige fluttered around arranging flowers and reorganizing my pantry. At first, I was touched by her energy. She complimented the antique furniture, baked muffins every morning, and often hugged me for no reason. It felt good, almost like having a daughter. But soon, small changes crept in. One morning, I came downstairs to find bright lights installed around the kitchen island, a silver tripod near the stove, and a large ring light reflecting off my china cabinet. "Surprise!" Mommy Paige chirped, wearing an apron with her logo printed on it. "I'm rebranding my channel. It's called My Charleston Cottage Kitchen. Isn't it cute?" I smiled politely, though my chest felt tight. "Just don't let the wires trip you up," I said lightly, trying to sound supportive. She giggled, already setting up her camera. "You'll love it. You'll even be in some of the shots my viewers adore, sweet family moments." From that day on, my mornings changed. Instead of quiet coffee and birdsong, there were camera clicks, scripted laughter, and the smell of staged perfection. I learned to walk softly around her filming schedule to avoid stepping into a frame. Once, I heard her tell her audience, "This charming old house belongs to my sweet mother-in-law who inspires my cooking every day." Her voice was warm, but when she turned off the camera, her smile faded instantly as she snapped, "Can we keep the counter clear next time, please?" I brushed it off. She was young, ambitious. Maybe this was just her passion. Maybe this new world of followers and sponsors was how people built their careers now. I didn't realize yet that my kitchen, my home, my life, everything I'd built with quiet dignity was slowly becoming a backdrop for her brand, and I unknowingly had just stepped into her frame. At first, I thought it was harmless. Paige had started using my vintage china and embroidered tablecloths for her cooking videos, saying they fit the aesthetic. She filmed them beautifully sunlight on porcelain, steaming casseroles on my lace linen, her cheerful voice narrating every step. Then one day, as I scrolled through her channel, I froze. The caption under one video read, "Using my husband's family heirlooms today. These dishes belong to his grandmother." I stared at the screen, my reflection faintly visible on the glossy surface. Those dishes didn't come from Travis's grandmother. They were mine. I had bought them 30 years ago on a trip to Savannah, saving up from extra shifts at the bank. A few days later at church, one of my friends leaned in during coffee hour and asked casually, "Rachel, is your daughter-in-law living with you now? Her kitchen looks exactly like yours." I laughed lightly, though my chest tightened. "Oh, really? I suppose many Southern kitchens look alike," I said. The women smiled politely, but I could see the curiosity in their eyes. I sipped my tea and prayed the subject would change. At home, Paige's filming grew more elaborate. She brought in branded boxes, decorated shelves with fake flowers, and placed her logo sticker on jars that had once held my homemade jam. Sometimes she would say to her camera, "This recipe reminds me of my sweet mother-in-law's kitchen." And yet the moment the recording stopped, her expression hardened. "Mommy, could you stay out of the background next time? The lighting works better without shadows." She began asking for grocery money for filming ingredients, saying it was all part of building her career. I didn't mind helping, she was family. But one afternoon, while looking over a credit card statement, I noticed luxury brands listed under Travis's supplementary card. Paige had been shopping designer bags, perfumes, shoes, all charged to that account. The same evening, I saw her social media story rewarding myself after a long filming day. She posed in front of a boutique mirror, the same handbag gleaming on her arm. Something felt wrong. My instinct, the same one that had guided me through decades of financial work, whispered that lines were being crossed. But every time I tried to speak, I saw Travis's smile, his calm belief that his wife was doing her best. I didn't want to be the nagging mother, the one who ruined their peace. So I swallowed. The unease smiled when Paige filmed near me and convinced myself that love sometimes meant silence. Still late at night, as I turned off the lights in the now half-studio kitchen, I felt the walls watching the house. No longer mine, but slowly, carefully being claimed by someone else. That evening, I returned home later than usual from a church charity dinner. The driveway was crowded with cars. Laughter echoed from the backyard, and music pulsed through the air like a heartbeat gone wrong. As I stepped through the side gate, my chest tightened. The soft lavender garden I had tended for 20 years looked trampled petals crushed beneath wet footprints. Strings of lights hung between the trees, bottles lined the patio, and a bright phone on a tripod streamed the chaos to hundreds of viewers online. Paige stood by the pool in a sequined dress, camera, ready, her friends splashing and shrieking behind her. "Welcome to my summer night live stream," she shouted into her microphone, waving a cocktail. When she noticed me at the gate, her smile flickered for half a second before she hurried over, still holding the drink. "Mommy, you're back early. Surprise. We just wanted to have some fun. You deserve a little celebration." I forced a small smile, my voice calm. "Paige, I don't mind a gathering, but the garden, it's been destroyed." She blinked, looking confused, then turned toward the camera, still recording. "Oh no, really, I'll clean everything tomorrow, promise." Her tone was sweet, but the apology wasn't meant for me. It was for her audience. When the guests left near midnight, the backyard was a mess. I quietly began picking up empty cups and soggy napkins while she chatted with Travis inside. I heard her laugh softly, the sound sharp as glass. When I walked in, she was wiping her eyes, pretending to cry. "I just wanted to make her happy," she whimpered. "Everything I do seems wrong." Travis looked at me helplessly, caught between us. "Mom, maybe she didn't mean any harm," he said. I nodded, too tired to argue. That night I couldn't sleep. The house still smelled of chlorine and cheap perfume. Around dawn I went to make tea, and that's when I heard it. Paige's voice, low but distinct, drifting from the hallway where she was on the phone. "I swear she's impossible. The woman's ancient and controlling. Everything has to be her way." My hand froze around the kettle handle. She laughed again, soft and cruel, then added, "If she hates the camera so much, maybe she shouldn't live in the frame." The words hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened, and I backed away before she could see me. Standing in my own kitchen, I felt like a stranger in someone else's home. Something fragile had cracked, not just the lavender stems, but the peace I had built all these years. It started with a notification on my phone one morning. "New upload from Paige Whitfield from Mom's Kitchen." I frowned at the title, thinking it was just another recipe video until the thumbnail loaded. There it was, my kitchen. My white marble countertops, my antique clock on the wall, even the embroidered curtains my husband and I had chosen decades ago. Only now Paige was at the center, smiling sweetly into the camera, wearing my apron. The new channel name made my chest tighten. From Mom's Kitchen. She hadn't asked me. She hadn't even mentioned it. The comments were pouring in. "What a beautiful home you have. Paige, love your Charleston-style kitchen. Your mother must be proud of you." Proud? I felt my stomach twist. Viewers believed this house, my house, belonged to her. Over the next few weeks, the transformation became impossible to ignore. Packages began arriving every day. Boxes piled high with cosmetics, cookware, and local products marked PR sample, collaboration gift. Couriers came to the door calling Paige's name, not mine. Delivery for from Mom's kitchen, they'd shout cheerfully. I stopped correcting them after a while. It was useless. One afternoon, I came home from grocery shopping to find the living room filled with tripods and boxes of candles labeled Charleston Home. My sofa was draped with branded throws, the coffee table covered in sponsor products. Paige looked up from her laptop and said brightly, "Mommy, hope you don't mind. The brand wanted a cozy southern setting for their ad, and your house just fits perfectly." I tried to keep my voice even. "Paige, this is my home, not a studio." She laughed lightly, waving her hand. "Oh, come on, it's just marketing. It's our home now, right? Family content always performs better." Then she turned back to her screen, adjusting her lighting setup as if I'd vanished. That night, I walked into the kitchen after she'd finished filming. The counters were sticky from spilled syrup, the smell of burnt sugar clinging to the air. I stood there for a long time, touching the spot on the wall where my husband's hands had once hung our first photo together. That kitchen used to echo with his voice, with laughter, with dinner conversations, with the sound of life. Now it echoed only with the clicking of cameras and the artificial tone of Paige's rehearsed cheerfulness. I realized then that the boundaries were gone. What was once my sanctuary, the heart of my home, had become a stage. My memories, my marriage, my peace, all repurposed for views, for clicks, for profit. The party started with balloons and laughter, but by midnight, it had turned into chaos. Paige called it her 100K subscribers pool celebration, a way to thank the fans for their love and support. Except the fans weren't there, only her friends, a loud, glittering crowd that filled my backyard with noise lights and champagne. Music blared through hidden speakers, echoing down the quiet Charleston street, where neighbors usually went to bed by 10. I watched from my bedroom window, hands clasped, trying to remind myself that it was just one night. By 11, people were diving into the pool, fully dressed, shouting and taking selfies. My lavender garden, the one my husband and I had planted together 20 years ago, was trampled flat. The scent that once calmed me now mingled with chlorine and alcohol. My antique cups and dessert plates, which Paige had borrowed for the aesthetic, lay broken near the patio. Around midnight, when I finally stepped outside, she waved at me cheerfully, drenched in pool water. "Mommy, isn't this fun? Don't worry, I'll clean up everything tomorrow." I wanted to yell, but instead I said quietly, "Paige, this isn't appropriate. The neighbors are complaining, and this isn't your home to treat like a studio." She laughed, brushing her wet hair back. "Oh, come on, Mommy. You're too serious. I'll handle it, I promise." Her tone was sweet, but dismissive, the kind of politeness that shuts you out completely. The next morning, the backyard looked like a storm had passed. Empty bottles floated in the pool, flower petals stuck to wet tiles, and the grass was torn into muddy patches. I sighed and decided to at least check that she had arranged the cleanup as promised. When I logged into the shared household account, my breath caught. There it was, a $620 charge from a cleaning company paid through Travis's credit card. But the card was linked to our joint expense account, the one I still managed for property taxes and maintenance. She had used family money, my money, without a word. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the transaction record, my fingers trembling slightly over the keyboard. It wasn't the amount that hurt, it was the carelessness. Paige hadn't simply disrespected my home. She had crossed into something I understood better than anyone else: finances, boundaries, trust. After 30 years in banking, I knew what misuse of funds looked like. And I also knew how quietly it could grow if no one stopped it. I closed the laptop, feeling the same cold clarity I used to feel before confronting a fraud case. For the first time, I wasn't just disappointed. I was alert. It happened on a Sunday morning when the air in the house felt tight with unspoken tension. I had spent the night thinking, rehearsing the right words in my head: calm, reasonable, motherly. When Travis came into the kitchen, I poured him coffee and said softly, "Honey, maybe it's time to set a few boundaries. Just small things, the filming, the finances, the noise. It's getting a little too much." He looked uncomfortable, eyes darting toward the hallway. "Mom, Paige is just enthusiastic. You know how she is. Maybe don't take it personally." Before I could answer, she appeared perfectly timed as if she'd been waiting behind the door. Her eyes already glistened, her voice trembling. "So this is what you think of me," she whispered, clutching her chest like a wounded heroine. "I only wanted to be close to you, Mommy. Why do you hate me so much?" Her words hung in the air like smoke. I froze the mug, still warm in my hands. Travis stepped between us instinctively. "Paige, no one hates you," he said gently, pulling her into his arms. She sobbed louder, burying her face against his shoulder. The sound of it, those staged, perfect sobs, filled the kitchen, drowning out any defense I could make. Later that evening, while I washed the dishes, I heard her recording in the living room. Her phone camera was pointed toward her tearful face, soft music playing in the background. Sometimes she said in a quivering voice, "Not every mother-in-law welcomes you with open arms. Some people just can't stand seeing you shine." She titled the clip, "When Kindness Isn't Enough," and within hours it had thousands of views. Comments poured in like acid. "Poor girl. Her mother-in-law sounds unbearable. Older women can be so jealous. Run from that toxic family." I watched the screen in disbelief, my hands trembling over the mouse. Travis came home late, his face drawn. "Mom," he said quietly, "maybe you could try to be a little warmer to her. People online don't just make these things up." I wanted to scream that they were seeing a performance, that every tear was scripted, but the words stuck in my throat. I could only nod, afraid that protesting would make me look exactly like the villain she was painting me to be. That night, as I sat alone in the dim kitchen, I finally understood what she was doing. Paige wasn't just playing with emotions inside this house, she was controlling the narrative beyond it. In the age of social media, she didn't need the truth. She only needed sympathy. And she had found the perfect audience. It was my birthday. A quiet Sunday morning filled with sunlight and the smell of lavender tea. Paige appeared at my door, holding a glossy box wrapped in pink ribbon. "Happy birthday, Mommy," she said brightly, her phone half hidden behind her back, as if she couldn't put it down for even one moment. Travis followed, smiling awkwardly, clearly relieved that his wife had made an effort. Inside the box was a pale blue dress labeled as a limited designer edition. I ran my fingers over the fabric, thin synthetic with seams that didn't quite line up. The tag bore a luxury brand's name, but years of handling real quality taught me the truth in seconds. It was fake. Still, I smiled, because that's what mothers do. "It's lovely, Paige," I said softly. "You didn't have to spend money on me." She clasped her hands dramatically. "Oh, Mommy, you're my inspiration. You've taught me so much about being a strong woman." The words sounded rehearsed, too polished, but I nodded anyway. When she asked me to try the dress on just for fun, I obliged, stepping into the living room mirror. It hung awkwardly on my shoulders, a size too small. Paige giggled, then quickly raised her phone. "Hold on, let me get a picture. You look adorable." I didn't realize she was filming. That evening, while I was cleaning up the table, I heard Travis's phone buzz. He chuckled, then looked uneasy. "Paige, maybe take that down," he murmured. She brushed him off. "It's harmless. People love lighthearted family moments." I didn't think much of it until 2 days later, when I received a message from my church friend Linda. It contained a link and a single line, "Ray, is she talking about you?" I clicked. The video showed me standing awkwardly in the blue dress, trying to smile. The caption read, "She tries, doesn't she?" followed by laughing emojis and hashtags about fashion fails. The comments were merciless strangers mocking my body, my age, my clothes. Some said, "Bless her heart, she's trying too hard," while others wrote, "No wonder Paige is the star of that family." I stared at the screen, my hands cold, my heart thudding. That night, I lay awake for hours, the laughter from that video echoing in my head. Paige had turned my kindness into entertainment, my dignity into content. I thought of deleting my social media, of pretending I'd never seen it. But something inside me shifted. For the first time beneath the hurt, a calm and steady thought formed. Maybe kindness wasn't enough anymore. Maybe it was time she learned what happens when you underestimate a woman who's spent her life reading numbers, patterns, and people. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when I found the receipt. I had been sorting through the pile of delivery boxes that seemed to multiply around the house ever since Paige's channel took off. Between the bubble wrap and shipping labels, one invoice caught my eye. The recipient name wasn't Paige or any sponsor brand, it was Caroline Whitfield, her mother. The address printed neatly below was a suburb outside Atlanta. At first, I thought it must have been a mistake. But the next line made my stomach tighten. Insulated packaging. Fresh meal delivery. That same day, I remembered Paige filming another one of her cheerful videos titled, "Dinner for Mom-in-Law, My Favorite Family Recipe." She'd plated the best portions, smiled for the camera, and said, "Everything I do with love." I had believed naively that Mom meant me. Later that evening, as I passed through the kitchen, I noticed her sealing a box with care. Inside were the roasted lamb slices and the crème brûlée I had helped her make earlier. She caught my gaze and smiled, casual and unbothered. "Just sending this off real quick," she said. To a fan I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She didn't even flinch. "Oh no. To my mom. I don't want her to starve emotionally just because she lives far away." The words came out smooth, playful, but her tone carried something sharp underneath, like the glint of a knife hidden in velvet. I stood there for a long second, pretending to nod, pretending it didn't sting. But inside, something sank. It wasn't the food. It was the message. Every gesture that had once looked like affection, every meal, every tribute video, had a double purpose. I wasn't a mother figure anymore. I was a prop. A costume she wore when the camera turned on, then folded away when it was off. That night, I couldn't bring myself to eat. I sat at the kitchen table, the silence pressing down on me heavier than any argument could. The smell of lamb still lingered in the air, sweet and bitter at the same time. For years, I had believed silence was strength, that patience could fix what pride broke. But as I looked around at the house that used to be mine, I realized silence wasn't strength anymore. It was surrender. Paige's behavior wasn't impulsive or careless. It was deliberate, thought out, systematic. And if I didn't act soon, she'd take not only my home and my dignity, but the truth itself. It happened on a humid night in early June, the kind that made every surface in the house feel sticky. Paige had just finished one of her endless live streams, her laughter echoing down the hallway long after midnight. I lay awake in my room, the noise still humming in my ears. When silence finally settled, I got up to get a glass of water. Oliver, my cat, was asleep by the window tail, flicking lazily. Everything seemed normal. The hallway lights were dim, just enough for me to see the outline of the staircase. I placed my hand on the banister and took the first step down. Then another. And then my foot slid. For a split second, I felt weightless. The next moment, there was only pain, sharp exploding through my leg as I tumbled down the stairs. My head hit the railing, my shoulder slammed against the wall, and I heard a sickening crack before everything blurred into shadow. I remember the smell before I saw it cooking oil. It clung to the wooden steps, glistening faintly under the faint light. Someone had spilled it, no, poured it, and it ran down in streaks like liquid glass. My body screamed with pain as I tried to move, but nothing obeyed. A door creaked open upstairs. Paige's voice floated down, high-pitched and theatrical. "Mommy!" "Oh my God, what happened?" She ran to me, phone already in hand, her camera light blinding. "Everyone, please pray for my mother-in-law. She just fell. Please send hearts." Through the haze, I could see the red light of her phone still recording. My chest tightened, not from pain, but disbelief. Even in that moment, she was performing. By the time the paramedics arrived, I was strapped onto a stretcher, half conscious, but I heard every word. One of the officers asked how the oil got there. Paige was quick, too quick. "It must have been Oliver," she said, pressing a hand to her chest dramatically. "He's been knocking things over all week. I told her not to walk without shoes." The officer frowned, glancing at the pattern of the spill. "All the way from the top step?" he asked. Paige forced a nervous laugh. "Cats are unpredictable, right?" Lying there staring at the ceiling, I could barely speak, but my mind was razor sharp. Oliver hadn't moved all evening. There was no overturned bottle, no paw prints, only a deliberate slick of oil placed exactly where I would step. As the ambulance doors closed, Paige stood by the gate, her face wet with crocodile tears, still clutching her phone. I saw the screen reflected in the glass, her live stream still running, comments flooding in. "Poor thing, you're such a caring daughter-in-law." And for the first time, even through the pain, I wasn't afraid. I was certain. That fall hadn't been an accident, it was a warning, and I was done ignoring the signs. After the surgery, when the anesthesia began to fade and the pain in my leg settled into a dull, steady throb, I asked Travis to bring me my laptop. The nurses thought I wanted to distract myself with movies or emails. They didn't know I was about to open a truth that would hurt far more than any broken bone. Travis hesitated at first. "Mom, you should rest," he said gently, placing the laptop on the small hospital table beside my bed. But I shook my head. "No," I told him, my voice calm but sharp. "I need to see it." He nodded silently and helped me log into the security system I had installed years ago, a habit I'd kept after my husband passed just for peace of mind. That night, it would become my salvation. The screen flickered to life. I clicked through the files until I found the timestamp 11:47 p.m., the night of my fall. My fingers trembled slightly as I pressed play. The footage was crystal clear. Paige appeared in the hallway, wearing her satin robe, her hair tied back, phone in hand. She walked into the kitchen humming softly and began frying something in a small pan. The oil hissed, crackled, then spilled. I watched as it dripped down the steps, spreading slowly like a dark shadow. Paige paused, looked at the mess, then turned away. No attempt to clean it. No sign of concern. My breath caught when I saw her place her phone on a tripod, angling it toward the counter. On the screen, she smiled that fake, practiced smile I had seen so often online and said cheerfully, "Midnight snack time with Oliver." The little cat jumped on the counter beside her, while behind her, the oil shimmered under the dim light. She posed, she laughed, she filmed while the trap she had made waited in silence. I froze, unable to look away. My hands were cold, my heart beating too fast. The image of her walking past that slick trail, knowing what would happen, was more painful than the fracture in my leg. Travis stood beside me, pale, his jaw tightening as he watched. "Mom," he whispered, but I couldn't answer. I just stared at the screen until the video ended, showing her walking upstairs, unconcerned, her phone still glowing in her hand. When I finally closed the laptop, tears slipped down my face. Not from pain, that kind of ache was physical, temporary. This was different. This was the weight of betrayal, cold and deliberate, captured forever by the unblinking eye of a camera. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fading flowers. Every morning, nurses moved quietly between rooms, their shoes whispering against the floor. I had been there for 3 days, my leg in a cast, my mind refusing to rest. Then Paige arrived, dressed in soft pink, holding a thermos and a shopping bag filled with containers. "I brought you some comfort food, Mommy," she chirped, setting everything neatly on the bedside table. "Homemade chicken soup, my special salad, all organic." She smiled into her phone as she spoke, angling the camera toward me. "Say hi to everyone. Look at this strong woman, my mother-in-law, my inspiration." I managed a weak smile for her audience. When she stopped recording, the room fell silent again. The soup smelled pleasant, warm with herbs and a hint of lemon. I took a few careful sips. It tasted fine, though a bit too rich. Paige watched closely, hands clasped like a nurse waiting for approval. "Do you like it?" she asked sweetly. I made it with love. Within half an hour, a cramp twisted through my stomach. Then another. The pain spread fast, sharp, and deep. The nurse found me pale and sweating, clutching my side. I was moved to another room, hooked to an IV, while a doctor frowned over the chart. "Likely food contamination," he said. "Something bacterial. We'll keep her on fluids for now." Paige gasped dramatically, hand to her mouth. "Oh no, that can't be my cooking. I was so careful. When I asked for the leftover food so the lab could test it, she froze." "Oh, I already threw it out," she said quickly, forcing a laugh. "The nurses told me to keep things tidy, so I just cleaned up. You know me, I can't stand a mess." Her voice was light, but her eyes didn't meet mine. The next morning, I stared at the empty trash bin beside my bed. Not even a lid from the thermos remained. It wasn't proof, not legally, but my gut told me everything I needed to know. For years, I had believed harm always announced itself through anger, through confrontation. But as I lay there weak and trembling, I understood something new. Sometimes danger comes, dressed in kindness, its smile warm, its hands gentle. You don't see the blade because it doesn't need one. That night, while the hospital lights dimmed, I whispered to myself, "A person doesn't have to stab you to destroy you. They just need to pretend they care convincingly enough." When I finally returned home from the hospital, everything felt different, quieter, emptier. The walls still smelled faintly of disinfectant from when Paige had cleaned up for me. My steps echoed against the hardwood floors as I moved slowly from room to room, leaning on my cane. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that the house hadn't changed. But when I opened my jewelry drawer, the truth hit me like cold air. The velvet tray that once held my wedding ring was bare. The gold watch my husband had worn every day before his heart gave out was gone. A few antique brooches, small but priceless, had disappeared too. I stared for a long moment, my throat tight, telling myself maybe the nurse had moved things while I was gone. Maybe Paige had locked them up for safekeeping. When Travis came home that evening, I mentioned it gently. "Some things are missing from my dresser," I said. "Probably I misplaced them before the accident." He smiled, distracted, scrolling through his phone. "Mom, you probably stored them somewhere safe and just forgot. You've been through a lot." His voice was kind, but dismissive, the tone children use when they think their parents are getting forgetful. That night, when the house fell silent, I decided to look for myself. Paige's laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, glowing faintly. She was asleep upstairs. I could hear the faint sound of her breathing through the baby monitor she used for her live streams. Curiosity, or maybe instinct, pushed me closer. On the screen was a draft email, and beside it, a tab labeled P. Whitfield Collection. I clicked. The page loaded into an online boutique, polished and elegant. Dozens of photos displayed vintage jewelry and collectibles, each labeled with flowery descriptions, from a Charleston family's heirloom chest, authentic Southern luxury. My heart stopped when I saw one of them, a jade bracelet with a small crack near the clasp. I knew that imperfection like my own heartbeat. It was mine. The caption read, Vintage heirloom from my husband's family collection. I scrolled further and saw my wedding ring photographed under studio light, my husband's gold watch gleaming against a velvet background. I didn't panic. I didn't even cry. Instead, I took my phone one slow photo at a time, capturing every invoice, every listing, every description. Then I emailed them to myself and backed them up on a private cloud. My old habits returned, neat, methodical, deliberate, like the banker I once was. By the time the clock struck midnight, the evidence was safely stored. I closed the laptop, careful not to disturb a single thing. The house was silent again, but this time the quiet didn't comfort me. It was the sound of truth taking shape, and I knew that whatever game Paige was playing, she had just made her first mistake. That night, as rain tapped against the window and the house lay silent, I sat at my desk with a cup of cold tea and opened the drawer where I kept old letters. On top of them lay the birthday card Paige had given me months ago, the one that began with sweet words and ended with venom. You deserve all the good things in life, not like that stingy, nosy old witch. I had told myself it was a joke, a childish attempt at humor. But now, with everything that had happened, those words glowed in my mind like a scar that refused to fade. For the first time, I saw the pattern, the manipulation, the staged affection, the carefully designed cruelty. Paige hadn't just invaded my home, she had rewritten my image in front of my own son and the world. Every tear, every accident, every sweet gesture had been a thread in her web. And I, the fool who believed in patience and kindness, had been caught in it willingly. I looked around my study, the framed photo of my late husband, the books on finance and estate law, the quiet order of my life before all this madness. Weakness, I realized, had been my biggest mistake. People like Paige didn't fear kindness. They fed on it. Silence didn't protect the truth. It buried it. And while I had stayed quiet, she had turned my story into her stage. I opened my notebook and drew a line down the center of a blank page. On one side, I wrote incident, and on the other, proof. Slowly, methodically, I began listing everything: the fall, the live stream, the soup, the missing jewelry, the false stories online. I included dates, links, and names. My handwriting was steady, precise, the way it had been during my years at the bank, when every decimal mattered. When I finished, I flipped to a clean page and wrote a single sentence, pressing hard enough for the ink to bleed through. If she sees me as a witch, then it's time this witch fights back. But I won't need magic, I have the law. The sound of those words comforted me more than prayer. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over Charleston and Oliver. My cat brushed against my leg as if sensing the shift in me. I closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and smiled for the first time in weeks. The witch, it seemed, was finally awake, and she wasn't afraid anymore. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Slacks, a cream blouse, the kind of outfit that said composure, not desperation. I took a taxi to downtown Charleston and stopped in front of a brick building with brass letters etched above the door, Howard Denton and Associates. I hadn't been there in almost 10 years, not since my husband's estate settlement. But I still remembered Howard's calm voice and the way he used to say, "Mrs. Nolan, the law only works for those who respect its patience." When he entered the conference room, he looked just the same: sharp suit, silver hair, eyes that saw straight through excuses. "Rachel," he said, shaking my hand, "you look like a woman carrying too many secrets." I told him everything: the fall, the missing jewelry, the soup, the lies, the public humiliation. I spoke slowly, methodically, like the banker I once was. He listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "There's a pattern here," he said, "but patterns aren't proof." "I know," I replied quietly. "That's why I came to you." He nodded once. If what you're saying is true, this falls under elder abuse and financial exploitation. Both are federal offenses under the Elder Justice Act. But we need solid evidence legally obtained, admissible in court. No confrontation, no emotional outburst. You'll win this by discipline, not fury. His words steadied me. What do you suggest? He reached for his tablet, scrolling through something. First, we set a digital perimeter. Install hidden cameras with motion detection, all perfectly legal since it's your property. Then we'll track financial activity tied to your accounts and devices. Every transaction, every login. He looked up, his gaze sharp. If she's doing what you suspect, she'll reveal herself. People like that always do. They can't resist the stage. I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. For months I'd been trapped in silence. Now finally someone believed me, and more importantly, had a plan. Howard. I said, if this works. He smiled faintly. When it works. You're not the first client to underestimate herself. Let her think she's still running the show. We'll make her own performance the evidence. As I left the office, the afternoon sun hit the windows, casting long reflections of the city on the pavement. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like preparation itself. Quiet, deliberate, dangerous. The day they came to set the cameras, I felt both nervous and oddly relieved. Howard Denton introduced the technician with a short nod and a quiet explanation that made me feel like a conspirator in a careful plan. The devices were small, unremarkable, and described as thermal sensors with built-in microphones. They could detect movement and pick up sound even in dim light, and they saved everything to a secure cloud owned by Howard trial team. He explained that because the recordings were stored on his office server and logged with timestamps and chain of custody records, they would be admissible in court. That last detail steadied my hands more than anything else had since the fall. They placed one unit near the kitchen island, where I used to roll pie crust. Another went on a high shelf in the living room facing the sofa, where family photos used to lean. A third was mounted in the hallway above the staircase, where I had fallen. The technician worked with careful, almost reverent patience. He showed me how the motion alerts would come to Howard and how any audio clip could be pulled and hashed so it could not be altered. I watched every movement, memorizing where each lens pointed the angle of the microphone, the tiny LED that would never shine in my living room, but would serve a larger light somewhere else. After they left, I sat with Oliver on my lap and practiced being small. I practiced not complaining about the noise of the lights, not asking why the tripod sat by the island, not remarking when Paige rearranged my teacups for better framing. I learned to hobble just enough to be believable, to touch the banister slowly, and say that my legs still hurt from the hospital. I forced my voice to be soft and forgiving when I spoke to Paige in front of Travis. When she asked if I needed help, I smiled and said that I was fine, that I appreciated her concern. Inside, I cataloged every reaction, filing feelings in the same neat columns I used to keep for balances and deposits. It did not take long for the cameras to collect what I needed. Within the first week, the cloud filled with clips that made my stomach cold. I watched often at night after the house was dark as Paige kicked my cane aside with a sudden sharpness and laughed at the way I stumbled. I listened to her shove my shoulder in a way that looked like an accident on camera, but felt pressuring when I tried to breathe. I heard her use a phrase about my living long enough to be a problem, words about how she could not truly be at peace until certain burdens were gone. Each time she spoke, the microphone captured the tone, the pause, the tiny breath afterward that betrayed a cruelty she would later perform for her viewers. I kept that footage like a ledger of wrongdoing. I did not rage or lecture. I recorded, archived, and waited. Every clip was another verified line in the case I was assembling. I moved through the house like a mild ghost playing the part they expected. At night, I replayed certain moments and felt anger and an unfamiliar calm. I was not helpless. I was gathering proof. I was no longer invisible. The following week, I met Howard Denton again in his office, where the hum of the air conditioner sounded like a metronome of strategy. He had a folder waiting for me, its label crisp and simple, Financial Activity Review. Inside were pages of bank statements, each line a small piece of betrayal. We traced everything linked to the joint account, he said, adjusting his glasses. And you were right to suspect something. The transactions were clear as day. Transfers from Travis's income account into Paige's personal savings, small at first, then growing bolder. Several payments were labeled vlog expenses or ingredient purchases, but the merchants told a different story. Designer boutiques, travel agencies, and online PR firms that specialized in boosting social media presence. The most recent one was a wire transfer to a marketing consultant in Los Angeles, $4,800. She's building an empire, I murmured, and she's using my son's name to fund it. Howard's tone stayed calm. We can prove financial exploitation, but not yet. If we freeze the accounts now, she'll play the victim again. We need her to keep moving to dig the hole deeper. He leaned forward, his voice firm. Let her spend. Let her think she's winning. Every transaction becomes a brick in her own wall of evidence. It went against every instinct I had. For 30 years in banking, I had been trained to protect, to prevent, to close loopholes before they bled. Now I was being asked to let the fraud continue on purpose. But I trusted him. I nodded slowly. And my assets, I asked. He opened another folder and handed me a single sheet titled Living Trust. Confidential. We've already started transferring your pension and investments into this trust, he said. It's under your name, only legally shielded. Paige has no claim, not through Travis, not even through inheritance. A weight lifted from my chest as I signed the papers. My hands no longer trembled. So while she's spending fake money, I said softly, I'm moving the real thing. Howard allowed himself a thin smile. Exactly. She's playing with smoke. You're holding the fire. That night back home, I watched Paige film another one of her cheerful cooking videos, laughing in her pastel kitchen, my kitchen. I could almost hear the hollow ring in her voice, the practiced charm. She had no idea that every swipe of her credit card was now a breadcrumb on the trail to her downfall. I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my ledger, and began noting the dates of each transfer like the old days. Finance, I thought, is a double-edged knife. And this time she was holding the blade by the wrong end. It started as a quiet performance, a role I played with deliberate precision. I began speaking slower, pausing mid-sentence as if searching for a word. Sometimes I forgot the kettle was still on or misplaced my reading glasses right in front of me. When Paige asked a question, I would blink in confusion, then laugh softly at my own forgetfulness. The act worked better than I expected. Within days, her patience began to fray like an old ribbon. At first, she masked it with forced sweetness, the sighs disguised as laughter, the tight smiles that didn't reach her eyes. But soon the mask slipped. Her voice rose when she thought Travis wasn't home. God, you're impossible, she snapped once when I took too long to sign a delivery. No wonder nobody wants to live with you. I didn't respond. I just smiled faintly, whispering, I'm sorry, dear. I'm getting old, I suppose. That made her angrier. By the second week, she was filming again, this time with venom disguised as honesty. One afternoon, I overheard her in the living room phone, held high tears, fake, but camera ready. Sometimes, she told her followers, you try to care for people who just don't understand the modern world. They judge, they control, they manipulate with their age. The video went viral within hours, under the title, when you live with someone who can't accept the new generation. What she didn't realize was that every video she uploaded carried a hidden truth: timestamps, metadata, and background audio. The cameras Denton had installed picked up her voice before and after, filming, capturing the rehearsals, the insults, the way she'd mock me between takes. Every fake tear became another thread in a web she was weaving around herself. At night, I would replay the recordings Howard sent me, the original files, with digital timestamps, confirming her fabrications. He labeled each folder by date, and I matched them to my handwritten notes. I kept a small, leather-bound journal on my nightstand, the same one my husband once used to record his business accounts. Now it was filled with her words, my reactions, and the exact minute they occurred. 10:43 p.m. Paige shouted that I'm pretending to be weak. Smiled, didn't respond. 7:20 a.m. She said I'm too old to understand technology. I nodded. Every line was calm, factual, detached. Emotion had no place here, only precision. I was no longer the trembling widow she thought she could manipulate. I was an investigator gathering evidence. Each insult she threw became a stone in her own downfall. And each smile I gave her, soft, harmless, forgiving, was the quiet sharpening of a legal blade she would never see coming. It began quietly over tea cookies and the soft hum of afternoon gossip. The women of St. James Church gathered every Thursday at the fellowship hall, their laughter echoing against the old brick walls. I had been part of that circle for years, though lately I'd kept to myself. That day, I decided to speak again, not as a victim, but as a storyteller. I told them about a friend, a woman my age, dignified and kind, who had welcomed her son and his young wife into her home. I said the daughter-in-law was beautiful, ambitious, and social media savvy, the kind of girl who could charm anyone. But behind the smiles, there was control, cruelty, and quiet theft. I described how my friend had fallen down the stairs one night, how her jewelry had gone missing, how her every act of kindness had been turned into public humiliation online. I never said my own name. I didn't need to. The room fell silent. Then came the murmurs, low, angry, compassionate. Poor woman, someone said. People nowadays have no respect for elders, another added. Mrs. Whitaker, who ran the church charity, shook her head. If this is true, it's abuse, and that girl should be exposed. The story spread faster than I expected. By Sunday service, I overheard people whispering about the lady from the fellowship group. The Silver Doves Club, an organization of retired professionals and businesswomen, invited me to tea the next week. I wore pearl earrings and a calm smile, the picture of composure. When they asked about my friend again, I gave the same account, just enough detail to sound credible, but never enough to reveal names. Among the Silver Doves sat Claire McIntyre, wife of a local news anchor. She leaned forward, intrigued. Rachel, she said, if your friend truly has proof of this kind of mistreatment, I could help. The station has covered elder financial abuse before. People would want to know. I stirred my tea, watching the lemon slice swirl. That's kind of you, Claire, I said softly, but not yet. The truth needs timing, like a seed. You plant it, and then you wait for it to grow where everyone can see it. She smiled, half understanding, half curious. So what will you do? I looked up and met her eyes. Nothing for now, I said. The stage is almost ready. I just need her to step onto it herself. I'll be the one pulling the curtain. Outside, the bells of St. James rang for evening prayer. Their sound carried through the streets of Charleston, soft, at first, then rising. A quiet ripple was spreading, and I knew it would reach exactly where it needed to. Karma doesn't rush. It just waits for the right audience. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day when the Charleston sunlight turned golden through the lace curtains. Paige arrived with a box of macarons, her smile sweet, and rehearsed. "Mommy," she said, sitting carefully beside me on the couch, "I have wonderful news." She placed her hands on her stomach, her eyes glistening as if she'd been practicing this moment in the mirror. "I'm pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." My heart clenched, not from joy, but from instinct, a mother's sixth sense that something was off. Still, I smiled, whispering, "That's wonderful, dear." She leaned forward, her tone soft but purposeful. "You know I just want our baby to grow up feeling safe, to have a stable home, just like you've always had this house filled with warmth, tradition, and love." Her words were honeyed, yet each syllable carried the chill of calculation. From her tote bag, she pulled out a folder. Inside was a neatly typed document. "A sample, will," she explained. "It's just a formality," she said lightly. "Nothing binding. I thought maybe, since this house means so much, you might want to ensure it stays in the family for your grandson." I looked at her, studying the way her fingers trembled slightly. Not from nerves, but excitement. This wasn't a spontaneous idea. It was planned, precise. She had learned the language of manipulation well. Not shouting, not threats, just emotional coercion disguised as love. In the eyes of the law, it had a name: undue influence. A quiet crime, but a serious one. I took the document from her hands, pretending to read every line. My name, the address, the property description, all correct. Then the final clause: the estate shall pass directly to the first male descendant of Travis Nolan. My stomach tightened. She was already reducing my life's work, my memories, into a bargaining chip for a child not yet born. "Of course," she continued gently, "this is only if something ever happens to you. I just thought it would give everyone peace of mind, especially Travis. You know how much stress he's under." Her eyes shimmered with crocodile tears, her voice trembling on cue. I folded the paper neatly and smiled. "You're right, Paige. Family should come first." Relief flickered across her face like lightning. "So you'll sign?" "Yes," I said softly, setting the paper on the coffee table. "If you truly mean this for the good of our family, I'll sign. But only with my lawyer present. You know I've always been careful with paperwork." For the first time, her smile faltered. "Oh, of course," she said quickly, trying to recover. "That makes sense." I reached for her hand and squeezed it lightly, my eyes kind but steady. "You've taught me something, dear," I said. "Even love should come with witnesses." She laughed weakly, not realizing she had already stepped into the stage I'd been preparing, the one where every word, every look was about to become evidence. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind that carried a deceptive calm, the sky soft and golden, the air filled with the faint scent of magnolia. I set the dining table carefully, placing the silver cutlery and crystal glasses with the same precision I once used to balance ledgers. Every napkin was folded perfectly, every candle trimmed to the same height. To anyone looking in, it was just a family dinner, but to me, it was a stage, and tonight the curtain would rise. At exactly 6 o'clock, Travis and Paige arrived. He looked tired, unaware. She, on the other hand, swept in wearing a crimson dress that caught every glint of light, her confidence radiating like perfume. "Mommy, this is lovely," she said sweetly, glancing at the table as though already claiming it. I smiled. "I thought we should celebrate new beginnings," I said, my tone calm, almost gentle. Howard Denton arrived shortly after, his briefcase in hand, his demeanor steady as always. He nodded politely to Paige, then gave me a knowing look that lasted just a moment, long enough to tell me everything was ready. The laptop he carried wasn't just for paperwork. It was connected to the hidden camera network we had set weeks ago. The microphones in the chandeliers, the lens in the antique clock, the discreet sensors along the baseboard, all synced and waiting. Dinner passed with small talk. Paige performing charm, Travis playing peacekeeper, Denton quiet and observant. When dessert was served, I set down my cup of tea and said softly, "I believe we have some documents to discuss." Denton opened his briefcase, laying out neatly printed pages on the table. The sound of the clasp echoed like a signal. Paige straightened in her chair, her voice sugar-coated. "Yes, it's just the will. We talked about this already, Mommy. It's all about family security." She glanced at Travis, who nodded uncertainly. I folded my hands on the table. "It's good I said that we have a legal witness here tonight. It makes everything official." She smiled, thinking she had won. "Of course," she said quickly, "transparency is important." But as she reached for the pen, I caught a flicker of movement on the laptop screen beside Denton, the faint glow of the live camera feed activating unseen by anyone else. Every lens in the house was awake now, recording not just words, but truth. I leaned back, my voice steady, almost tender. "Before I sign Paige, I just want to be sure everyone understands what this means. A will can't be forced or influenced or written under pressure. That would make it invalid, wouldn't it, Mr. Denton?" He nodded slowly, his eyes sharp behind his glasses. "That's correct, Mrs. Nolan." Paige froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the cameras to catch it. Paige reached across the table, her manicured hand covering mine, her smile, syrup sweet and trembling with fake tenderness. "Just one signature, Mommy," she said softly. "Once you sign, everything will be settled. I promise I'll take care of you for the rest of your life." Her tone dripped with affection, the kind that smells like poison when you've learned to recognize it. I looked into her eyes, steady and calm, the way a teacher looks at a student caught cheating, but not yet scolded. Then I nodded slowly. "Of course, dear," I said, taking the pen from her hand. My movements were deliberate, my breathing even. I bent over the document, the will she had so carefully prepared, and signed at the bottom, just as she expected. The room went still, like the second before a storm. "Thank you, Mommy," she whispered, exhaling in relief. The victory flashed in her eyes, quick, bright, arrogant. She reached for Travis's hand, her fingers brushing his as though sealing a deal. "See, honey, everything's fine now. Family peace, just like I said." That's when Howard Denton, who had been sitting quietly to the side, closed his briefcase with a soft click and tapped a single key on his laptop. The lights dimmed slightly as the dining room wall lit up the projector screen, rising silently like judgment itself. At first there was only static. Then the first clip appeared. Paige in the kitchen, her face twisted, voice sharp. "You're useless. Can't even stand without whining." She shoved the cane aside, the frame shaking as Rachel stumbled out of view. The next clip, the living room. Paige grabbing a velvet box, whispering into her phone, "This will sell easily. No one will notice." Another, her hand slipping jewelry into her purse. Another, her laughing while mocking an elderly voice. "Mommy, can I help you, Mommy?" Followed by her own cruel laughter. Each video was time-stamped, each angle unmistakable. The sound was clear, crisp, undeniable. Travis froze, the color draining from his face. His eyes darted between the screen and his wife, disbelief crumbling into horror. "Paige, what is this? What?" She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor. That's not real," she stammered. Someone edited it." Her voice broke her body, trembling. Who filmed this?" Denton adjusted his glasses, his tone calm but cold. "Every recording was made on this property, stored automatically on a secure legal cloud. Chain of custody verified. Nothing here is altered, Mrs. Whitfield Nolan." Paige's lips parted, but no words came. The crimson of her dress seemed to drain with her face, leaving her pale, exposed, and cornered. I folded my hands on the table, my smile faint but unshakable. "Some truths," I said softly, "don't need to be spoken, dear. They just need to be shown." The silence after the final video was so thick, It felt like the air itself had stopped breathing. The only sound came from the faint hum of the projector and the uneven rhythm of Paige's trembling breath. Howard Denton closed the laptop, the metallic click echoing through the dining room like a gavel striking wood. He adjusted his tie, and spoke with the calm precision of a man who had been waiting for this moment. Mrs. Nolan. He began, his tone measured but sharp, did not sign any legal document tonight. The paper you provided, Ms. Whitfield Nolan, holds no standing under South Carolina law. However, he paused, his gaze turning toward Paige. Your actions over the past several months, physical intimidation, verbal harassment, financial exploitation, and attempted coercion of will, do carry weight. Under state and federal statutes, these fall under criminal offenses: elder abuse, theft, and coercion of testamentary intent. Paige's lips parted, but no words came out. The red of her dress seemed to drain from her face, leaving her ghost pale. Denton reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder stamped with an official seal. This, he continued, placing it gently on the table, is a preliminary report of those violations. It has already been filed with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office. All that remains is Mrs. Nolan's signed confirmation, and the investigation will proceed. The room was frozen in time. Even the candles flickered as though unsure whether to stay lit. Then Travis, my son, dropped to his knees beside me, his voice breaking. "Mom," he whispered, clutching my hand. "I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it. I was blind." His tears fell onto the back of my hand, warm and heavy. I stroked his hair gently the way I used to when he was small. "You see now," I said quietly. "That's what matters." Across the table, Paige shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. No, you don't understand," she stammered. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted her to love me, to see me." Her voice cracked on the last words, desperate, hollow. Denton's expression didn't change. "Affection," he said flatly, "is not a defense for fraud or abuse." Paige turned toward Travis, reaching out. "Please tell them I—" He stood slowly, his eyes glassy and distant. "I don't even recognize you anymore," he said, his voice breaking. The only sound left was the faint rustle of the official documents as Denton slid them across the table toward me. The house that had once echoed with laughter was now a courtroom, and justice at last had found its way to my dining room. I rose slowly from my chair, the legs of it scraping softly against the wooden floor. The room was frozen in a strange silence. Not the calm before a storm, but the quiet after one. Paige stood trembling near the table. Her mascara streaked down her face, her hands shaking as if she could erase everything that had just happened. The projector was still on, frozen, on the last frame, her smirking face caught mid-lie. I turned toward her, meeting her eyes. "Paige," I said, my voice steady, calm, the voice I used to use when delivering final audits at the bank. "I worked in finance for 40 years. I know what fraud looks like. I've seen people destroy themselves trying to steal what they didn't earn." I paused, letting the words settle into the silence. Then I leaned slightly forward. "And you, my dear, just signed your own sentence." Her mouth opened, trembling. No, please, I didn't." But before she could finish, the front door opened with a heavy thud. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, the blue lights from their cruiser flashing faintly through the window. Howard Denton approached them calmly, handing over the folder with practiced precision. "Detectives," he said, "this is the subject we discussed. Charges include elder abuse, financial exploitation, and coercion of will. All evidence has been verified and time-stamped." The officers nodded. "Ms. Paige Whitfield Nolan," one of them announced, voice firm, "you are under temporary custody for investigation regarding elder abuse and financial theft." Paige staggered backward, clutching her chest. No, this is a mistake! Travis, say something! She screamed, her voice breaking into sobs. But Travis didn't move. He stood near the dining table, eyes down, face ashen. His voice was barely a whisper. I can't, he said. Not anymore. The officer pulled out the handcuffs, the metallic click echoing through the room. Paige's cries turned desperate, her red dress stark against the white light of the chandelier. Please, I didn't mean I was just... Her words drowned beneath the sound of the cuffs locking around her wrists. As they led her toward the door, her phone slipped from her pocket, still recording, still live. The device hit the floor with a sharp crack, the camera facing upward. On the screen, the scene continued to stream the chandelier, the handcuffs, my calm face, the lawyer's steady gaze. Hundreds of comments flooded in heart emojis replaced by gasps and disbelief. For months, she had used that same platform to paint me as cruel, manipulative, outdated. Now the truth was being broadcast to her own followers, raw and undeniable. I turned toward the lens, my voice soft but unwavering. Karma, I said quietly, has a way of choosing its stage. The next morning, Charleston was calm again. The magnolia trees outside my window swayed gently in the breeze, as if nothing had happened, as if the night before hadn't torn through my family like a storm. I sat at my kitchen table, now cleared of cameras, lights, and props. The space, once again, mine. Howard Denton sat across from me, the morning sunlight glinting off his glasses as he reviewed the stack of documents one last time. All the evidence is in order, he said, his tone professional, but not cold. The footage, the financial records, the witness statements, they form a solid foundation. The police have already logged it as a criminal case under elder abuse, financial theft, and online defamation. He looked up at me, his gaze steady. Now we move from exposure to justice. But tell me, Rachel, do you wish to pursue compensation? I shook my head slowly. No, I said softly, wrapping my hands around my cup of tea. Money isn't what she took from me, and it's not what I want back. Denton nodded. Then what do you want? I met his eyes, the calm inside me, surprising even myself. A restraining order, I said. I don't want her anywhere near me. And I don't want her using my name, my house, or my image to make another dollar online. That's all. He wrote it down in silence, his pen scratching lightly on paper. Then he closed the folder and leaned back. You're doing the right thing, Rachel. The law will do its part. Let it, and don't let anger lead you. I smiled faintly. Anger, I said, almost to myself. No, I've lived too long to waste my heart on that. I don't want to destroy her. I just want her to finally see what she's done. Through the window, I saw two officers outside their uniforms, crisp, waiting by their car. They were there to collect the full case file, the flash drives, and the signed authorization. I handed the final folder to Denton, who passed it through the doorway with calm efficiency. The process was clean, methodical, official, the way justice should be. When they left, the house fell quiet again. The ticking of the clock on the mantel was steady, like the rhythm of closure. I looked around the kitchen, the same room Paige had turned into a stage, a marketplace, a lie, and exhaled. It was mine again in every sense of the word. The law would take its course. Paige would face her consequences. But I no longer needed to watch. The act of letting go, I realized, was its own form of victory. The news spread faster than I ever imagined. By the next morning, every local outlet in Charleston had the story. Young vlogger Paige Whitfield accused of elder abuse and financial exploitation of her mother-in-law. The headline appeared on every phone screen, every cafe television, every social feed. Reporters gathered outside her apartment complex, cameras flashing as if they were covering a celebrity scandal, except this time the glamour was gone. The live stream that had accidentally captured her arrest was now viral. Millions had watched the moment she went from influencer to criminal suspect. Her own voice, once soft and honeyed, now replayed endlessly across TikTok, Instagram, and local news clips. "Mommy, please, I didn't mean to," followed by the sharp click of handcuffs. Viewers didn't just watch. They dissected, reacted, judged. Some called it karma. Others said it was justice finally catching up with vanity. By noon, brands began pulling out. The first to issue a statement was a cookware company she had promoted for months. "We condemn any form of abuse or unethical conduct. Our partnership with Ms. Whitfield has been terminated effective immediately." Within hours, others followed, from kitchenware to wellness drinks to luxury candles. Each one cited violation of brand ethics in polite but unmistakable language. Her once bright image, the smiling homemaker in perfect lighting, the daughter-in-law everyone wished they had shattered overnight. Screenshots of her old videos flooded the internet, overlaid with sarcastic captions, "Cooking with love," and someone else's kitchenware, or braising resentment, one meal at a time. By evening, Paige's subscriber count plummeted. Her sponsorship emails leaked, showing unpaid invoices and broken contracts. Influencer gossip accounts began calling her the fall of the Charleston chef. She tried to respond once, a shaky video filmed through tears, but the internet had already turned. Every apology she offered was met with laughter, every justification twisted into another meme. Finally, sometime near midnight, her accounts went dark. Her YouTube channel, her Instagram, her brand website, all deleted. The empire she built from other people's kindness collapsed in a single day, undone not by rumor, but by truth. I sat by the window that night, the house bathed in the faint glow of streetlights, and whispered to myself, "The internet forgets nothing, but sometimes it remembers exactly what it should." Travis packed his last box in silence. The once luxurious home they'd shared was stripped bare. No laughter, no lights, just the echo of what used to be a marriage. The fallout from Paige's scandal had spread beyond her. His own company released a statement the week before. "Due to ongoing investigations and reputational concerns, Mr. Nolan will be taking an indefinite leave of absence." In corporate language, that meant he was done. He moved into a modest apartment in North Charleston, beige walls, secondhand furniture, and a view of the parking lot instead of the marsh. It wasn't home, but it was peace. For the first time in years, he could think without the constant buzz of cameras and scripted smiles. I saw him only once that week, standing at my gate with a folded envelope in his hand. "Mom," he said, voice low. "I filed for a legal separation. The lawyer said it'll protect you too. It includes a no-contact clause for Paige." His eyes were red, not from anger, but exhaustion. "I just want you safe." I placed a hand on his cheek. "You've already done enough," I said gently. "Now take care of yourself. You deserve a clean start." He nodded, looking smaller somehow, like the little boy who once clung to my hand on his first day of school. When he left, he didn't look back, and for the first time, I believed he might finally see clearly. Meanwhile, Paige tried everything to salvage what was left of her reputation. She published an open apology on her last remaining platform, claiming she had been misunderstood and emotionally overwhelmed. The post began with, "To the woman I once called Mom," and ended with a promise to heal and rebuild. But the internet had grown weary of her words. Commenters flooded in within minutes. "So now you're sorry because you got caught, another PR stunt. Too little, too late." Her attempt at redemption was met not with forgiveness, but ridicule. Every sentence she wrote was dissected, mocked, and turned into screenshots for gossip pages. She deactivated the post within hours, but the damage had already multiplied. Even her closest friends, the fellow vloggers, the sponsors, the sisterhood she had once boasted about, quietly unfollowed her. In the digital world, silence was the cruelest exile. As for me, I stayed silent. I neither spoke to reporters nor posted online. My phone rang endlessly with requests for interviews, but I declined them all. I didn't need to defend myself. The truth was already doing that for me. My silence became its own kind of statement, calm, immovable, undeniable. Sometimes the loudest justice doesn't come from shouting. It comes from stepping back and letting the world see what you never needed to prove. Caroline Whitfield went live at exactly 8 o'clock that evening. Her face filled the screen, flawless makeup pearls at her neck, and the same self-righteous glare her daughter had once worn. "I cannot stay silent anymore," she declared, voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "People are attacking a pregnant young woman who's already suffered enough. You all don't know what kind of toxic mother-in-law she had to deal with." The comments poured in sympathy from a few, outrage from many. Her live session hit 20,000 viewers in 10 minutes. She dabbed her eyes theatrically, sighed deeply, and went on. "Paige is my daughter. She made mistakes, yes, but she is not a monster." The real cruelty came from that old woman who— She didn't get to finish the sentence before the chat exploded. Someone had just posted side-by-side screenshots, one of Caroline's social media photos from a few months earlier, showing her flaunting a new designer handbag, and another from an old video of Paige's kitchen, where the same handbag could be seen on the counter, labeled family heirloom. Then came the next post, a necklace, a vintage brooch, a sapphire bracelet. All items Rachel once reported missing. By midnight, a Charleston investigative journalist released a feature article titled "The Hypocrisy Network: When Mother and Daughter Share More Than Ambition." The piece detailed months of evidence connecting Paige's borrowed luxury items to Caroline's social media posts. It was factual, sharp, and devastating. By morning, the fallout was complete. Caroline's employer, a local media communications firm, issued a brief public statement. Due to reputational concerns and pending investigation, Mrs. Whitfield has been placed on administrative leave. Her name was everywhere, her once polished reputation, now a public spectacle. Paige, already drowning in scandal, deactivated her mother's account to stop the chaos. But it was too late. Screenshots had been saved, reposted, dissected across platforms. The same followers who once adored their perfect family bond now mocked them mercilessly. And me, I didn't need to say a word. Watching the news that evening, I simply turned down the volume, sipped my tea, and let silence be my only reaction. Some storms, I realized, don't need thunder. They destroy by their own momentum. Winter had settled gently over South Carolina, wrapping the coast in quiet mist. Months had passed since the scandal, long enough for headlines to fade, but not long enough for the memories to disappear. Paige now lived in a small apartment above a cafe in downtown Charleston. The once shining vlogger who used to film every corner of her life now worked behind the counter, brewing lattes, wiping tables, and avoiding every lens that dared to recognize her. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A woman who had lived for the spotlight was now hiding from even the softest light. When her son was born, there was no celebration, no flowers, no balloons. Only her mother Caroline sat beside her in the hospital, silent and exhausted, her once sharp voice dulled by public humiliation. They went home the next day, two women and a newborn, trying to rebuild something out of the ruins of their reputation. One cold morning, as snowflakes brushed against the window of the cafe, Paige returned from her shift to find a small package on her doorstep. There was no return address, no name. Inside, neatly folded, was a pale blue knitted blanket, soft, handmade, the kind of thing that took time and patience. Tucked inside was a simple card with a few handwritten lines. "May this child grow up knowing what love truly means. Teach him that kindness is not a tool to be used." For a long time, Paige just stared at it, her fingers trembling. Then slowly tears began to fall, quiet, unstoppable. She didn't know what hurt more, the weight of regret, the emptiness of what she'd lost, or the realization that this small act of mercy was the first genuine kindness she had ever received without a camera watching. Across the state in the coastal town of Beaufort, I sat on the porch of my cottage watching the gray waves roll against the shore. Oliver, my old cat, curled beside my feet, purring softly. The world felt still. No noise, no performance, only peace. I poured myself a cup of tea and watched the steam curl into the cold morning air. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger or sorrow, only a deep, quiet understanding. Justice had done its work, but more importantly, so had time. I whispered to the wind, not expecting an answer. I never needed to win against anyone. I just needed not to lose myself. A few months later, I sold the old house in Charleston, the one that had seen both love and betrayal, and moved to Beaufort, a quiet coastal town where the mornings smelled of salt and jasmine. My new home was small, but warm, with white shutters and a porch that faced the sea. Every morning, I brewed tea, unfolded the newspaper, and wrote letters for the church's volunteer group. I didn't write about pain or revenge anymore. I wrote about resilience, about learning to breathe again after everything has been taken from you. In my journal, I wrote one line that became my compass. Forgiveness isn't about whether they deserve it, it's about whether I deserve peace. I read that sentence often, especially on quiet evenings when the sea breeze carried the scent of rain. Travis visited me sometimes with his little boy in his arms. The child had his father's eyes, gentle, curious, always watching. When I held him, I felt something soften inside me, something that told me life had decided to begin again in its own way. Paige never came. Sometimes I saw her car parked far down the road, but she never stepped through the gate. I didn't wave. I didn't turn away either. There are distances in life that must remain untouched for the sake of everyone's healing. Days in Beaufort passed slowly, peacefully. I planted roses by the porch, volunteered at the library, and spent afternoons teaching children how to read. The ocean became my companion. I listened to its waves as they reminded me that even the wildest storms eventually lose their strength. I found a kind of freedom in that sound, the kind that doesn't need to shout or prove itself. One afternoon, when the sun hung low and gold over the water, I sat on the porch with Oliver curled in my lap. His fur was warm against my hand, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly safe. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel defeated. I simply felt whole. The law had done its part, but time and silence had done the rest. As I looked out over the horizon, I whispered to myself, I never needed to win against anyone. I just needed not to lose myself. The sea answered with a soft crash, as if agreeing. If I could speak to whoever listens beyond this story, I would say this. If you ever witness an elderly person being mistreated or taken advantage of, don't stay silent. Because truth, even buried deep, will always find its way back to the light.